Hi, I'm Madison Miner with Say What Podcast here with Protect Our Kids. And in today's interview, I have a guest on here who is a very brave soul. Her name is Laura Becker, and she is a detransitioner. She mentors parents, she mentors and coaches parents, as well as mentoring peers. And this fall, at the end of this year, she also has a book coming out called Surviving the Trans Myth. I can't wait to read it myself, and I encourage you to do the same. So please welcome on the show today, Laura Becker. Laura, welcome to our show.
Hi, Madison. Thanks so much for having me.
Absolutely. So I just had some questions for you today. I wanted to know, how did your story begin? Can you tell us a little bit about how your childhood was, what it was like growing up in your home, and what brought you to go through the decision of transitioning to a different gender?
Right. So for those who might not know, I'm a detransitioner. So I did go through a medical and social transition in my youth, and I detransitioned and have since now come out the other side and now kind of blowing the whistle on the trans myths and how to help kids get out of it. So, I've been through a lot of really interesting experiences, and where it began was, I was growing up as a pretty normal middle class kid at first. But I definitely had some social and emotional issues. It led to me getting diagnosed on the autism spectrum when I was 11. And I never really got assistance at school or other resources for that. Instead, my parents sort of bought into the medical model that says that you have a chemical imbalance, or if you're experiencing depression or anxiety, it's something genetic and not something sociological. But in reality, what was going on at home was there wasn't just, this internal kind of neurological thing. There was actually abuse going on in the home from my father. There's psychological, emotional, and verbal abuse. And that led to my self-esteem being destroyed. And I was already a sensitive kid, quirky, not really fitting in with my peers, girls or boys. And so I was especially vulnerable to the trans ideology that says that if you feel different, then maybe it means that you're not meant to be your sex. And I was always a tomboy. So I had so
Same.
many different.
Me too.
Yeah. So imagine if you had grown up in my generation, I'm Gen Z, and you're on the internet and you're a tomboy. You don't want to wear makeup. You're just I just want to wear t-shirts and jeans, kind of struggling to fit in. And then there's abuse going on. You're going to feel dehumanized, and you're going to feel like I don't even belong on this planet. And I was very suicidal starting around age 14 and on. And then I found gender ideology on Tumblr, online, and in my school's Gay Straight Alliance Club. And the gender ideology instructs kids that if there's something wrong with you or you're questioning your identity, which every kid questions their identity, that's actually normal.
Totally normal. I agree.
There's a whole stage of development, Eric Erickson's stage of development. It's literally identity versus role confusion, where kids try on different identities, they start experimenting, taking on responsibility, and learning who they are as becoming adults. But for kids like me, who were kind of being emotionally neglected, or they fell into a cult on the internet, that identity was foreclosed. And so I was kind of stuck in arrested development, as well as autism. A lot of the kids that get into this are on the autism spectrum, which
that was my next question. Yeah, because I've heard that statistically is very common, especially for girls who have a diagnosis like autism and enter into the transgender ideology.
Yeah, absolutely. It's something that a lot of people are starting to talk about, but in the mainstream, a lot of people aren't really aware that when you have autistic characteristics, it often means that you might be gifted in certain areas, but struggling or developmentally delayed in other areas. Autism is a sensory processing disorder. So in the realm of literal body integrity, feeling at home in your body, social and emotional processing, and intimacy with other people, you might be delayed or struggling with that because the sensory input from the outside environment and your own thoughts and feelings is more intense or more overwhelming.
Of
And
course.
so, of course, these kids are going to be even more sensitive to body dysmorphia. And then when the trans ideology says, hey, if you're experiencing any form of bodily discomfort, you might be trans, these kids who have felt alone and unique, but kind of being bullied for it or not really understanding where they fit in, suddenly they feel like, oh, I finally get it. It feels like a miracle. Like you
Yeah.
finally found yourself.
You feel seen. You feel understood, right?
Yes, you feel seen, you feel understood, and you feel validated for your differences. But the sad thing is that what trans really is a body modification cult. So you're instructed, hey, you have this special kind of spiritual thing about you. You're trans and, you just are meant to medicalize your body. And the perspective I've now taken, obviously, as an adult who wants to protect kids like I was, no one is born needing cosmetic surgery to thrive. No one needs to have these body modifications in order to be their real self. Yeah. True authenticity and love for yourself means accepting what you can't change and what you can change in your actual healthy, intact, natural given body. And trying to change it is only going to result in more pain.
Right.
So
a lot of pain, I've heard.
Yeah, it's traumatic. I've developed PTSD actually from the transition, from the medicalization. I ended up having my breasts cut off at the age of 20 when I was very suicidal. Wow. And I took testosterone, and I've had permanent changes from that, like lower voice. I still have to shave my face every day. I grow facial hair. And thankfully, that's all it was, because testosterone, it isn't just, a drug like someone might use weed or other drugs to cope. Like I was using a lot of drugs to cope as well as testosterone, but it's marketed as a kind of cure-all for women that are having these depressive issues or bodily issues. In reality, it can cause infertility. It can cause genital atrophy. Thankfully, I've avoided both of those things. But for the surgery, I literally had sexual organs cut off, and I can't really sugarcoat that. That was deeply traumatic, and it's something that I live with for the rest of my life.
Sure. Oh, I'm so sorry, Laura.
Thank you. I've become pretty used to talking about it, but it just still makes my blood boil when I know that it's still being done to kids, and that there's so many girls that if they just were able to wait, if they just were able to let themselves live a little bit, practice a little self-forgiveness, maybe get out of a toxic environment around some individuals in the cult or even in their, daily lives where they're not being accepted for who they really are. Like people are lying to them that they're the opposite sex or that there's something that needs to be changed. They just waited a little bit. I detransitioned at the age of 22.
Okay.
So 2 years
very quickly after
surgery.
You had your double mastectomy.
Mm-hmm. So it wasn't very long after that I realized that none of that had helped me. And of course it hadn't helped, because the deeper rooted problems are not actually anything about me. They're just that I had low self-esteem from being abused. Like that's actually a normal response to abuse. If, your father is saying, that you're a worthless piece of trash and things like that, that's not anything wrong with you. You just happen to be in the wrong environment.
Right.
And once I got away from that environment and started being around some older people or mentors or friends that were able to say, hey, none of that's true, I was very quickly able to start healing and recover from any sort of bodily issues that I had. Unfortunately, the damage was already done in terms of my breasts, being gone forever. And I just really am tired of this happening. So that's why I've written my memoir that's Surviving the Trans Myth, because it really is a lie that people en masse are just kind of instructed to believe, like, oh, this is the same as being gay. No, it's not. It's cosmetic surgery to treat a mental health condition that says you hate your body. Right. And there's nothing scientific about that.
Yeah. So wait, okay. So you, at 14, you said you started having suicidal tendencies. At what age did you did you do the hormone blockers? What age did that all start for you?
So around age 15, I discovered the ideology on Tumblr and
Right. Okay.
started questioning my gender identity. And I was identifying as non-binary, as genderqueer, as trans masculine, and then finally settled on being a gay trans man, which just means a straight woman who doesn't accept that she's a straight woman.
Yeah.
And so I came out about age 18. But keep in mind that for autism, when you're developing, you're emotionally and socially behind for a few years. So although I was legally 18, I was not functioning in any way as an adult or, having these sort of social or emotional skills. At 19, I was prescribed the testosterone from a LGBT clinic, and they knew of my mental health history. They knew I had a hormonal condition, polycystic ovary syndrome. They knew that I had autism, but in the ideology, they say that, oh, if you're having any distress, that means that you must really need this treatment. That's because it's not real medical treatment. It's just basically a consumer-led product. So if you want to go and get plastic surgery, of course, the plastic surgeon more often than not is going to say, oh, yeah, you would look great with a nose job. This is really no different. They just
They
want to
want
make
your money.
Yeah, exactly.
So did insurance cover any of that? Was that all out of pocket? And then were your parents, did they have to sign on to you taking the medication?
So once you're 18, you don't need any parental consent for anything, which is one of the biggest problems that the clients that I see, the parents face, because their kids are not developmentally mature. When they're autistic, they're just not on par with typical development. And if they have issues socially or emotionally, they're not able to truly consent to something that they don't even have long-term planning to understand. But I didn't need any parental approval. I just went to the clinic and said, I'm trans. I think I would like to get testosterone. I got the prescription in about a 2-hour appointment and then never really talked to them again. They just signed off on it. I believe that I actually got it either for free or at a very strong discount because it is a community clinic. So they want to, they're trying to subsidize that for the LGBT community.
And was there any counseling offered, any conversations that they had with you to actually get to the root issue? Or was it just, here, take drugs, we'll fix it this way?
That was more the latter. It was more like, hey, you need these drugs. And, one kind of argument that I hear from my opponents, the trans activists, are like, oh, you weren't seeking therapy. You were just being stupid and arrogant, and you were just not really following the real protocol for trans. That's not true. I actually was seeking counseling. I was in and out of both inpatient psychiatric hospitals and outpatient care since the age of 11 years old. So I was seeking psychiatry. I was seeking counseling. I was seeking gender specific counseling since I was about 16 years old. But the problem is with gender affirming counseling is that you go in and they're just like, yeah, you're valid that you're trans. They do not address the root issues. They're there only to validate your special identity, often because they themselves have this special identity that their egos have latched onto. And that's all that they're allowed to do in many cases. These therapists, even if they were to push back, which many don't feel comfortable with that because they're seen as a bigot, their regulatory boards might actually remove their licensure because it's seen as conversion therapy to just tell a girl that she's not a boy. I mean, this is ridiculous. So I was seeking counseling and I was seeing a psychiatrist. The psychiatrist is the woman that actually diagnosed me with gender dysphoria. So I was officially diagnosed by a medical doctor who obviously didn't know what she was talking about. And I had all these doctors that were saying, yeah, you're trans, you need to do this. Even though I was suicidal, I wasn't even brushing my teeth or showering on a regular basis. I mean, it was severe depression. And in terms of the surgery, that was mostly covered by my parents' insurance.
Okay.
What's interesting is the insurance company said, okay, we deem it medically necessary to remove your breast tissue, but it's a cosmetic choice to have your nipples grafted back on afterwards. So it's an interesting, weird split that the insurance companies were like, okay, fine, this is medical to remove your breasts, even though they were healthy breasts. There was no medical reason. It was cosmetic, but apparently it was cosmetic to put the nipples back on. So in order to have these, which I will admit are completely unfunctional and not typical looking nipples. I mean, this is like a skin graft that doesn't look male or female. It
Right.
grafted back onto my body. I had to pay out of pocket for that.
Wow. Just to feel somewhat normal after this life-changing surgery.
Mm-hmm.
So you had a psychiatrist diagnose you with gender dysphoria. Did they ask about the home life? Did they ask about, the emotional, mental abuse you were going through? Or was it similar for them where they just said, nope, you just have this confusion about your gender and that's what we're going to focus on?
Well, the sad thing there is that I was very forthcoming about what I was going through. I'm a very open person, hence why I've written a memoir about my trauma history. But I was very open and really desperate for help. I was saying, I'm having suicidal ideation. I'm struggling to take care of myself. I'm having these relationship problems. I'm having, problems with my dad and low self-esteem and all of it. It's not like I was pretending to be fine, but that's what's so insidious is that all of these problems were overlooked. There's actually a clinical term for that. It's called diagnostic overshadowing, where one diagnosis overshadows all of the others. So for me, oh, you're trans. That's all that matters. That's all we're going to think about. And we must give you this gender affirming care. This is the only pathway for trans, instead of zooming back out and looking at a more holistic perspective and saying, okay, this girl has some gender issues, but she also has a lot of other issues. I wonder if there's more going on here, more looking at the unconscious, which is what traditional psychotherapy usually does. And what I do in my coaching is a holistic approach. So unfortunately, it didn't matter that I was that forthcoming about all these issues, forthcoming about all my medications that I was taking, all these antidepressants and the hormonal issues. It just didn't matter because I said I was trans.
Yeah, they were focusing, like you were saying, they were overshadowing everything else with your one diagnosis that, from what I've heard, is a very lucrative diagnosis where the medical industry makes a lot of money off of you having that gender dysphoria. So would you say that social media, and you said you found information about your diagnosis on the internet, would you say that social media is part of the problem when it comes to everything that's going on right now in our youth?
Social media is the number one avenue for kids to get sucked into the cult. I would say the most pervasive problem overall are the adults that are not safeguarding this, like the adults in the activist organizations like the Trevor Project or Planned Parenthood, or the adults that affirm, that are the therapists, or even some of the teachers or parents that start affirming because they're not really educated. That's the biggest problem. But the kids get that information and think that it's okay from the internet. There's no question about that. And parents are starting to wake up, but for a lot of them, it's a little too late because their kid, I have a client, their kid literally found trans ideology on Roblox, like just a little video game for kids, like Pinterest, obviously Reddit, Discord, YouTube. The algorithm, once you click on one video about gender stuff, or even just it comes up in your feed and you're like, oh, watching it for 30 seconds or whatever, the algorithm gets trained to recommend more and more and more. And there's an extreme social contagion going on in the video world, like TikTok, YouTube, Instagram. These kids will make these videos coming out as trans and saying, oh, you don't need your parents to validate you. Your parents are transphobes. But again, the biggest problem here is the adults in the room, that when the kid comes out as trans, they take them to a therapist or even a pediatrician or even at church at times. This is also happening like in, all sorts of circles socially. The adults will also say, yeah, your parents are transphobes if they don't call you he, him pronouns when you're a 12-year-old girl.
Yeah. And I've heard of parents even being told by medical professionals, if you don't validate them, they're going to be suicidal. They're going to commit suicide. That's all on you. And I know you're not in California, but here in California, you mentioned Trevor Space, and it just sickens me. We have now passed a state law that Trevor Space QR codes have to be printed on the back of all of our student ID cards. And it blows my mind because I've heard about Trevor Space, and I would love for you to enlighten the people watching this right now. There's no medical professionals that you're contacting as a child, and you can contact them in privacy. It's totally secret. So will you talk a little bit, go in more depth on what Trevor Space entails and how you feel about Trevor Space?
Right. So the Trevor Project, it originated as a gay and lesbian organization, and it started as a hotline for youth that maybe weren't being accepted by their parents. Maybe there was some need to, a safety issue, like they're being beaten by their homophobic parents, or a lot of these kids that are gay ended up being runaways. So they developed this hotline that you could call for assistance, getting resources in the community, and also a suicide hotline. But over the years, and you'll see this in every LGBT organization, the shift was away from gay and lesbian needs and into transgender needs because it's more lucrative, because there already is gay acceptance at this point in most areas of the West. So now what is happening is these kids will call this hotline and they'll be affirmed in their gender identity, and they'll be told, yeah, your parents are unsafe. Your parents are unsafe because they won't call you a girl. And there doesn't need to be any actual abuse going on in the home. They will say it is abusive or it's actually violent to not affirm. And these kids are encouraged to run away. And we have several states right now. I believe California is one of them, and also Washington, Colorado, Minnesota. These are trans sanctuary states, meaning that if a child crosses state lines, their parents will not be notified of their whereabouts. And I know the Trump administration is trying to work on this. This is a major safety issue because these kids are vulnerable. A lot of the people that might be interested, I mean, just think about it. Adults that are extremely interested in gender and sexuality for kids, what are their motivations, right? There's a lot of predators that will access children through these hotlines and online, especially when they're runaways. It's very obvious when you think about it for 2 seconds, but the way that some of the kind of woke ideology will discuss it is, oh, well, yeah, they need to be affirmed. But then it's like when it's your kid actually running away to another state and you don't even know if you're going to see them again or if they're in the hands of a predator, which some of my clients have had that happen, then you're not really being like, oh, yeah, their pronouns are so important, you know?
What now? Because now the issue is they're being trafficked or sexualized at a very young age. And because I live here in California, it's insane. The idea that, if I've heard of divorce situations where one parent affirms and the other doesn't, and the parent who doesn't affirm will actually lose custody over their child because they refuse to call them by their chosen pronouns or their new name or their new gender. And I think about my own kids, because I have one child who came to me at 3 years old and said, Mommy, I love pink and I'm a girl. I want to be a princess. And I said, oh, we can pretend. Absolutely. Let's pretend. Let's play dress up. And I said, but you're a boy and you'll always be a boy. And I remember someone actually telling me how insensitive I was being because I didn't affirm that my son loves pink and wants to, become a girl. And I was so mad and it kind of proved them wrong, because literally the next week, that same kid comes up to me and he's like, Mom, duck, I'm going to shoot you with my gun. And I'm an army guy and my favorite color is camo. And so it's so sad to me that we've reached this point where we're now being chastised as parents for not affirming our children. And we could even lose our kids here, especially here in California. And I don't know if it's like that in your state, but that's terrifying as a parent that the state could take my kid into foster custody without my will, without me knowing. They can take him from my kid's school and I would never see him again.
It is. It's horrifying. And I think a lot of people aren't aware of just how bad it is. Like a lot of the parents, I would say the majority of my clients are just like, or at least were at one point, just everyday kind of liberal minded people, kind of live and let live, very intelligent, very educated, caring people who, when their kid started expressing some gender identity stuff or talking about this, they didn't really think it was anything beyond a fad or a phase. They're just like, oh, let them explore, if they want to dye their hair or use a different name, it's not that big of a deal. But they don't realize that there's a whole gender industrial complex behind this. And when you peel back the curtain, you see all of these organizations profiting from these kids' just normal adolescent confusion,
Right.
and then alienating parents. And if you even question it, you're called like a far right-wing bigot or all these types of slurs.
Yeah.
But what these parents don't realize, the parents that might be judging other parents for, like in your situation, which sounds very California to me, they don't realize that there's no homophobia going on. There's no like phobia of any kind. It's literally just, hey, my kid doesn't have a brain that's fully formed because they're a child and they're exploring different fantasy ideas.
Mm-hmm.
And transgenderism is nothing more than a fantasy. And sadly, there are adults that want to believe in this mystical idea of trans as a legitimate, like physical phenomena, like there's something in your brain or blood. It doesn't have any scientific basis, but they're like, well, there's something that just makes you trans.
Right.
And you know what that thing is? Just saying you're trans. So it's like there's no evidence for it. It's just a fantasy.
Yeah. Yeah. So what would you say to these parents who are told to affirm or lose their child?
I would say do not affirm at any cost. There is no good that's going to come from lying to your child, even for one moment. Do not let your child use different pronouns. Do not let your child pretend that they're the opposite sex. Do let your child explore with different clothes or find out, what their preferences are, what their hobbies are. Let them get a part-time job. Let them do normal kid stuff, teenage stuff. Do not lie to them and say that you can be the opposite sex. Do not entertain the idea of puberty blockers, hormones, or surgery at any time. You are the parent. You have the control. You have a lot more power than you think. I have a lot of parents that they feel like they need to walk on eggshells around their kid because they're worried about alienating the relationship. In reality, your relationship is going to be a lot stronger if you can have tough conversations, if you can lead the child as the adult and say, hey, these are the boundaries of our family. These are our values. We're not going to lie. We're not going to pretend. You can, like pink. You can have, emotional tantrums about it. You can be upset that, we don't want you to talk to your online friends who are suicidal teenagers who also want to cut their breasts off. Like, that's fine.
Or that guy on Trevor's face that's not a safe adult.
Right. Like these parents, I would say, you are so strong. You have so much more power than you think, but you do need to get educated on some of the tactics of the cult. And there's now, thankfully, a lot more resources. Like when I was growing up, there was no resources. Only when I started to detransition were people starting to write about this online and study it a little bit. Thankfully, now there's several organizations and websites and coaches like myself that are available to help. So you don't have to go through this alone, but I will, God, I hate to say the word validate, but I will admit that it is a very isolating experience to be a parent who doesn't want to affirm their kid, but feels like, oh, I guess this is the only option. Just know that's not the only option. Your kid having cosmetic surgery because they're mentally ill or just going through adolescence, that's not the only option.
So how can parents show love and support, do you think, to their child when they're going through this gender dysmorphia, when they're going through this confusing stage of their lives?
I think the best way to show love in general is through radical honesty. So, parents saying, hey, I'm really curious what's going on. I know that you've been feeling sad lately. I know that this is a tough time. Like, I'm here. I want to listen. I want to learn who you are. I want to understand what you're going through. Really listening, really being curious and open, but then also sharing your own curiosities, sharing your own thoughts and feelings and values about it too. So a parent saying, hey, I know that, this is kind of a popular thing right now that some kids are doing, but have you thought that maybe that's just another form of avoidance, just how you might avoid doing the dishes? Like, what are you avoiding? Like, let's talk about that. Let's get curious. And if they get upset saying, I love you too much to allow you to self-harm using hormones. Hormones are a drug. It's not healthy to take drugs like that. We're not going to do that. We're going to find you ways in your life to feel good in your body, to feel good about yourself, and to just give you a little pause. Like, let's just pause. Let's take some time to really help you. And then as time goes on, you're going to be able to love yourself so much better, and you're not going to need this stuff anymore.
Well, and as a mom of 4 kids, I think, that all of this is a little terrifying as a mom, anything that my kids are dealing with growing up, but this one's high up there. And I think even through, the schools that my kids are at and the therapists that are available, what advice would you give parents when it comes to looking for therapists that ensure your family values are kept? Because there's a lot of confidentiality in a therapy room, right? Where once that door closes, you may not really know what's being talked about with that therapist and your child. So what would you say to parents in regards to therapy and finding someone that's safe for them?
That's such a good question, because so often the parents will be like, okay, I need to get my kids some mental health treatment. I need to get them a diagnosis. I need to get them medication. And they'll take them to a specialist for gender, or even just a normal therapist, or especially in inpatient psych hospitals, they tend to be very affirming. So they have a kid that might have some suicide ideation, eating disorders, cutting behaviors, stuff like that. They take them inpatient, and then they're affirmed as trans inside the mental hospital. You don't want to be affirmed as anything in the mental hospital. But so it's a good question. I would say as parents, you need to be very vigilant that this ideology has spread throughout all the helping professions, and the regulatory boards like colleges and the American Academy of Pediatrics, the American Psychiatric Association. The major associations are currently still indoctrinated with this ideology. And so all of these practitioners are going to be being taught this. So if you take your kid to the pediatrician, don't leave them alone in there. Like, you have the option to leave them alone after a certain age. I wouldn't. I would stay in that room with them and make sure that you know everything that person is saying to them, because often these helpers, these helping professionals will go behind the parents' back because they believe that these parents are evil or transphobic or hurting their kids by not affirming. So they feel entitled to overpower the parental authority and the parental relationship and give the child information. And obviously, we know from a safeguarding perspective, any adult that's keeping secrets from your child or won't discuss these things openly with a parent is being predatory or manipulative.
Right.
So I would be extremely careful. Research every single adult that your kid is going to interact with in any sort of therapeutic context. Make sure that, you ask them questions, you ask them about their policies, and if they have basically anything about LGBTQ supportive or LGBT friendly or safe space or anything like that, those are huge red flags that they're only going to affirm, and they're not going to question your child. So do not let your child be triangulated in this kind of triangulation with any of these professionals that are going to affirm your kid's delusion.
Yeah. I think that's very terrifying and wise counsel on your part. What would you say to a child who's questioning their gender, who's confused about their body? What would you say to them?
I would say I'm sorry that you're feeling bad. I'm sorry that you feel uncomfortable in your body. I'm sorry that you're experiencing this distress. How can I help you to learn more about yourself and learn more about your gifts that you are? Because I would love to help you not dislike yourself so much.
How would you feel, or how has your detransition journey made your identity and your feeling of self better or worse?
Well, it's been a pretty crazy journey. I went from cutting my breasts off and wanting to kill myself and using hard drugs and just doing all the typical trauma survivor things. I mean, like all of these issues that I had are just normal PTSD things from childhood abuse. And once I kind of realized I'm really no different than any other person. And in fact, I fell into this cult, but I'm not even the only one who fell into this cult. There are so many people that have fallen into it and are still in it. So once I was able to really look existentially at all of these problems that I thought were so unique to me or so personal or that could never be changed and realized, oh, these are just human problems, I've been able to heal from the vast majority of the trauma that I've been through. I mean, it's an ongoing process. I believe healing is lifelong, right? Because there's always new stressors or situations and we still need to recover from those. But, I don't feel any suicide ideation. I'm very happy to be alive. I wake up every day and say a prayer of gratitude. I love being a female. I love being a woman. My greatest ambition is to be a wife and be a mom someday. And my identity now is as someone who has survived, someone who has learned to love herself despite the odds, and is now helping other people to just access the love that's already available out there for them.
My next question, I apologize, he's going to have to put it back at the beginning, but my next question is based on a parent notification policy. When I was on the school board in Orange Unified here in Southern California, I passed a notification policy with the purpose of including parents in the conversation with their kids, not to be an outer, not to be transphobic, but it was because I believe as a mom, as a parent, as a human, that parents have the rights to parent their children and they should know everything that's going on with their kids at school. So all that is to say, were your parents aware right at the beginning of your choice of your gender dysmorphia? Or were they involved in the conversation, or was that something that you kept secret from them?
So my parents and I had a very strained relationship due to my father's abuse. And so I was very emotionally isolated from them. And although I was very open about my, problems and mental health struggles, we didn't really have a close relationship where we could talk. And my parents were pretty much unavailable to help with my gender problems. They were kind of dealing with their own stress. And so unfortunately, although they did know about it, they still didn't really understand it. And part of it, again, is it's not just them, it's generationally, Gen X, they didn't know. They didn't understand the internet. They didn't understand the ideology, how it spread online. And that's not their fault. But I will say that there's two different types of parents that I see in coaching. There's the ones that are obsessively researching everything and they're, walking on eggshells, trying to get their kids to deprogram. And then there's the parents who are just suddenly waking up and they're like, wow, this seemed to come out of nowhere. And then they look back a little bit and they're like, oh, I was really busy with work at this time, or I was going through a divorce. And there's no blame there when I work with these parents. But a lot of times, as a parent, it doesn't matter what the issue is. Your kid might, get into a wrong crowd pretty easily. And a couple months or years go by and you realize that your relationship has kind of become a bit estranged. And that's when it's so hard for parents to harness that authority because they're like, oh, the relationship is already fragile. So they start doing things to try to appease their kid. And they think, oh, I'll earn my kids' love and trust and approval if I give them whatever they want. It's actually the opposite. the kids want a parent to have an authority. They want to have boundaries. They want to know what the limits of reality are because it helps them feel safe if an adult is in control. And I often will say to parents, they'll come to me and they'll be like, just please help my kid. And I'm like, how's your marriage going? And they'll be like, oh, and so
Pretty
we'll
bad.
talk about that. We'll talk about their marriage. We'll talk about their personal relationship to their own body or their own anxiety. A lot of times these are family issues. They aren't just the kid having a mental health issue or being in a cult. It's everything combined, right? Looking at it holistically. So I'll say, if you are a parent, no judgment, but maybe doing a little reflecting. Hey, is there ways that I've been unavailable to my kid that has led them to maybe, seeking that validation elsewhere? Okay, how can I regain my own trust and my own sense of authority to be a strong parent and make sure that I'm the one who's giving my kid a sense of reality?
Laura, I am so glad that you're a survivor, and I'm so grateful for what you've done already just in the short time that you've gained this confidence and this courage to coach and to mentor these adults and these kids. So I'm thankful for you for what you've done. And I mean, God is using you in massive ways, and your time is not done. And I'm, just so thankful. I'm thankful that you've shared your story with us today. Is there anything that you feel our listeners, maybe if it's someone who's struggling with gender dysphoria, is there anything that you would want them to hear here at the end?
If you're struggling with gender dysphoria, I would love for you to know that it is very possible to heal from gender dysphoria without having hormones or surgery, without needing to mimic the opposite sex. You are a beautiful human being. It's okay that you're having pain, but just because there's pain in your body doesn't mean there's something wrong with your body. Just because your thoughts are painful doesn't mean that you are not your sex. And the most freeing thing that you can do is forgive yourself, forgive your body for the pain that it's experiencing. Your body loves you. Your body wants you to be strong and be healthy. Your body wants you to live out its sexual gifts the best that you can. And if you pretend that your body isn't whole, then you're never going to feel whole, no matter how much you chase the high of transition. And just know that you aren't alone. And there's many people before you that have healed their gender issues and no longer have any gender dysphoria and are very happy as their sex.
So, Laura, thank you again so much for being on here, and thank you for your wisdom and your experiences that you are not letting go of. You are keeping those experiences, and you're helping to touch so many lives with all that you've been through. So thank you for being on our show. Thank you for all that you've contributed just in this conversation. You've given me so much courage and, I would say, stamina to continue fighting this fight to protect kids, because I know that it's such a crucial battle. So I encourage everyone who's watching this, please follow Laura on social media. We'll post it here. And if you can, also purchase her book. It's coming out this fall, Surviving the Trans Myth, Her Personal Journey. Purchase that book. Pass it around to people who need to hear her story as well and be encouraged by her. So thank you, Laura, for being on. We are here with Say What Podcast. My name is Madison Miner. We have social media outlets with X. We have YouTube with our Say What Podcast. We have our website, pok.org. We are on Instagram, Facebook, and we are here to protect our kids, to protect our future generations, and to encourage our kids to grow up just like Laura is in her body and have confidence in who they are. So thank you for being with us, and we look forward to seeing you next time.